Imagine a world where being too loud, loving the wrong person, or even having a suspicious mole on your skin could mean torture, mutilation, or death. For millions of women throughout history, that wasn't a nightmare. That was reality. Across ancient, medieval, and early modern societies, women lived under laws that controlled their bodies, their speech, their sexuality, and even their thoughts. Punishments targeting them were often cruel, public, and designed to humiliate as much as to hurt. Today, we're going to uncover some of the most disturbing punishments women faced in different eras and cultures, and what they reveal about fear, power, and control. Ask yourself as we go, how much of this has truly disappeared and how much has simply changed form? Let's start with one of the most chilling tools ever designed to silence a woman's voice, literally. In early modern England and Scotland, a woman who gossiped too much, argued too loudly, or publicly insulted others could be branded a scold. That label alone was enough to invite punishment. Authorities developed a device known as the scold's bridle, or branks. Picture a metal helmet shaped like a cage, sometimes decorated with horns or grotesque faces to make the wearer look ridiculous or demonic. Inside it, a cruel piece of metal pressed into the mouth, pinning down the tongue so the victim could not speak. Women forced to wear this contraption were paraded through the streets while neighbors pointed, laughed, or shouted abuse. It was pain, but it was also theater. A public warning. This is what happens if you speak out of turn. Silencing a voice has always been the first step in controlling a body. Can you imagine the message that sent to every other woman watching from the window? The fear of outspoken independent women even gave rise to another term, shrew. In some parts of Europe, especially medieval Germany and Austria, a shrew was a woman who argued, resisted her husband, or simply refused to obey social norms. For women like this, there was another punishment, the shrew's fiddle. This device looked vaguely like a large flat frame. It had a hole for the neck and smaller openings for the wrists. Once locked in, the woman's head and hands were trapped in front of her body, making it almost impossible to move comfortably, let alone defend herself. Sometimes two people who had been arguing, often a husband and wife, or sometimes two women, were locked together in a double version of the device, forced to face each other in public until they made peace. It was part punishment, part spectacle. The lesson was simple. A woman who refused to stay in her place could be immobilized, displayed, and mocked. If you think this fear of disruptive women was unique to Europe, think again. Variations of similar restraints existed in other parts of the world, showing just how universal that anxiety really was. Now, imagine being strapped to what looks like a heavy wooden chair, rolled out in front of your entire town, and then plunged into cold water again and again while people cheer. This was the fate of many women punished using cucking stools and ducking stools in medieval and early modern England. The cucking stool was often used for public shaming. The victim, frequently a woman accused of gossip, sexual misconduct, or even witchcraft, was strapped to the chair and wheeled through the streets. People threw rotten food, shouted insults, and laughed. It was a mobile stage for humiliation. But the ducking stool was far more dangerous. Attached to a long beam by the river or a pond, the chair could be raised and then suddenly dropped into the water, submerging the victim. Some women would be plunged multiple times, gasping for air in between, terrified and freezing. If they survived, it proved their guilt. If they drowned, they were declared innocent, but of course it was already too late. When justice is based on fear, innocence becomes irrelevant. How many innocent women died simply because someone didn't like their behavior, their appearance, or their independence? In some places, public shame weighed as heavily as physical pain, sometimes literally. In the 16th and 17th century England, a punishment known as the drunkard's cloak targeted both men and women for drunkenness, but it was also adapted to shame women accused of sexual misconduct. The device was usually an empty wooden barrel with holes cut for the head and arms. Once inside, the victim had to trudge through the streets wearing the heavy cask, unable to move gracefully, while crowds laughed and jeered. The barrel turned the human body into something ridiculous, clumsy, and inhuman. For women, it was another way to say, your misbehavior doesn't just reflect on you, it stains the entire community and will make an example of you. Why go to such theatrical lengths? Because shame is contagious. Watching someone punished that way made others fall in line, often without a word being spoken. Not every punishment involved metal and wood. Some of it left marks that followed women for life. In some European colonies, including parts of early America, women found guilty of adultery could be forced to wear visible symbols of their supposed crime, letters sewn into their clothing, brands burned into their skin, or other marks that screamed their supposed shame to the world. Imagine never being able to walk down a street without everyone knowing the most private details of your past. No way to hide, no way to start over. In some societies, clothing or tattoos were used this way, a permanent, living sentence. A woman didn't just serve her time, she carried her punishment with her every single day. One of the darkest chapters in European history is the witch hunts, during which thousands of women and some men were accused of practicing witchcraft. But how do you prove someone is a witch? One method involved searching for a witch's mark, a mole, scar, or birthmark supposedly given by the devil. When no such mark could be easily found, witch hunters sometimes used special needles to test the skin. Professional witch prickers jabbed the accused repeatedly, looking for a spot that didn't bleed or cause pain. Of course, many of their tools were rigged, retractable needles and tricks that ensured the outcome they wanted. Another superstition-driven method, used in some regions, involved scratching. A person claiming to be possessed would scratch the alleged witch until blood was drawn, and if their symptoms mysteriously improved afterward, that was treated as evidence of guilt. These tests were built on fear, not reason. Once someone was accused, the odds were stacked against them from the start. While some punishments focused on humiliation, others permanently altered the body. In ancient China, certain crimes, including theft and fraud, could be punished by removal of the feet. Archaeological remains have shown women missing their feet, but otherwise healthy, suggesting this was not the result of injury or disease, but deliberate punishment. In parts of ancient Egypt and the Byzantine Empire, another brutal penalty existed, cutting off the nose, a practice known as rhinotomy. For women accused of adultery, especially those from higher status families, losing the nose was devastating. It not only caused physical suffering, but also destroyed their social value in societies where appearance and honor were tightly linked. A disfigured face meant more than pain, it was social death. The woman carried visible proof of her alleged shame forever. Meanwhile, men accused of similar behavior might receive milder penalties, fines, beatings, or temporary exile. The contrast speaks volumes about whose bodies were seen as more important to control. Not all punishment was physical. Some of it struck at a woman's identity, status, and future. In ancient Rome, under Emperor Augustus, a woman found guilty of adultery could lose key legal and social privileges. She might be barred from remarrying freely, lose her dowry, or be exiled. Her name could be stained for generations. In Korea's Joseon Dynasty, noble women accused of adultery or improper remarriage could be stripped of their status entirely. A high-born woman might suddenly find herself classified as low-born, losing rights, protection, and respect overnight. This type of punishment didn't just affect one life. In some cases, descendants of such women were blocked from holding public office or prestigious roles, carrying the burden of a long-ago crime they never committed. When the law attacks a woman's status, it's not just about her, it shapes the whole future of her family. So what do all these brutal, often theatrical punishments have in common? They weren't just about the crime, they were about control. Control over who could speak, who could desire, who could resist, and who would pay the highest price when they stepped out of line. From metal masks to mutilation, from public shaming to social exile, societies repeatedly sent the same message. A woman's body and behavior belonged not to her, but to her husband, her family, her community, or the state. When fear becomes law, cruelty starts to look like order. It's easy to look back and think, we're so far beyond that now. But are we? Today, punishments may be less visible, less theatrical, but in many parts of the world, women still face violence, social exile, and legal penalties for behavior that